Someone rang the doorbell, then used my key. My name is Cameron, and what happened 3 months ago still messes with my head. It was supposed to be a fresh start, my first apartment after college, finally living on my own. I'd been crashing with my parents to save money, and when I found a place downtown within my budget, I jumped at it. Small, third floor, older building, but it had big windows and real hardwood floors. It felt like a step forward. The landlord, Mr. Peterson, seemed like your typical small-time property owner, maybe late 60s, always wearing button-ups tucked into jeans. He told me the previous tenant had lived there for years, but left suddenly for a job out of state. He didn't offer much detail, and I didn't ask for any. I was just relieved to have a place that didn't smell like mildew and had working heat. The move-in day was rough. I didn't hire movers, just dragged everything up 3 flights myself. I only had the basics: a bed frame, boxes, a thrift store couch, and kitchen stuff. By evening, I was exhausted and sweaty, but excited. I decided to start by setting up the kitchen. That's when things got weird. I was putting dishes away when I noticed the pipe cover under the sink wasn't sitting flush against the wall. It looked like someone had removed it and shoved it back without lining it up. I crouched down to fix it, and that's when I saw a faint red blink from behind the pipes. At first I figured it was a sensor, maybe something from building maintenance. But when I pulled the cover off and shined my phone flashlight inside, I saw exactly what it was: a tiny camera, about the size of a thumb drive, taped to the back wall. It had a red light blinking steadily and a battery pack stuck to the side. The lens was pointed directly through the cabinet opening, giving it a wide view of the entire living room. My heart dropped. I yanked the camera out and stared at it in disbelief. It wasn't cheap looking. It was small, wireless, and well-positioned. Whoever set it up knew exactly what they were doing. And the red light meant it was live. That meant someone had been watching, or worse, was still watching. I tore through the apartment like a maniac. I checked the bathroom, and sure enough, behind the toilet tank was another one, same style, same red light, aimed directly at the shower. I moved into the bedroom, climbed up to the air vent above the closet, and found a third camera tucked inside with night vision lenses. I found one behind a power outlet plate, and the worst one was inside the smoke detector above my bed. That one had its own internal storage. Someone had been collecting footage for a long time. That was when panic set in. Not just fear, real panic. These weren't just live streaming cameras. Someone had a whole setup in place. This was organized. It didn't feel random or like someone off creep, it felt planned. Long term. I called the police right away. 2 officers showed up maybe an hour later. They were polite, but they didn't seem particularly alarmed. They took the cameras as evidence, asked a few basic questions, and suggested maybe the previous tenant had installed them herself. That didn't make any sense. Why would someone hide cameras aimed at the shower and bed? For security. When I asked if they were going to investigate the landlord, they told me unless I had proof he installed them, there wasn't much they could do. They told me to change the locks, get a security system, and keep an eye out. And then they left. I didn't sleep that night. I kept checking corners, opening cabinets, and staring at the ceiling like something was going to move. The thought that someone could have been watching me, not just now, but from the moment I toured the place, made me feel sick. The next morning, I called Mr. Peterson to tell him what I'd found. His reaction wasn't what I expected. He didn't sound shocked or concerned. In fact, he got defensive almost immediately, claiming he had no idea what I was talking about and that there were never any cameras in the unit. When I told him the police had taken them for evidence, he lost it. He started yelling about me tampering with property and threatened to evict me for damaging the unit. And then he slipped. He said, "You have no idea what you've done. That equipment was expensive, and the people who wanted those recordings don't like being disappointed." I hadn't told him where the cameras were or how many there were. But he knew. And the way he called them equipment said everything. That's when it hit me. The sudden departure of the last tenant. The lack of outrage from Peterson. The fact that he referred to the cameras as if they didn't just belong to the apartment but to someone else. He was involved. Maybe he wasn't the only one, but he knew exactly what had been happening. I called the police again and explained what he said. They noted it, but again, they said it wasn't enough for criminal charges. Not without proof linking him directly to the installation. Over the next week, I kept catching glimpses of Mr. Peterson in the parking lot. He didn't say anything. Just sat in his car sometimes, watching the building. I also started noticing strange things. My door unlocked when I came home, drawers slightly open, closet doors left ajar. I knew I hadn't left them that way. I changed the locks and installed visible security cameras inside and outside the apartment. I didn't ask for permission. I didn't care. I also started documenting everything: photos, videos, even logging the times I saw him near the building. I found a couple of previous tenants through social media. 2 of them told me they moved out early because the place gave them a bad feeling. One even remembered her bedroom vent making weird noises. Then one night, 2 weeks after finding the cameras, I was getting ready for bed when I heard a key in my door. I froze. The lock turned, but I had a chain latch installed. It held. I heard muffled voices on the other side. One of them was Mr. Peterson, and the other I didn't recognize. Another man, maybe younger, whispering. Then they tried the key again, jiggling it harder this time. I grabbed my phone, hit record, and walked quietly to the door. When I cracked it open with the chain still attached, I saw Mr. Peterson standing there, looking startled. The guy behind him took off down the hallway as soon as I appeared. Peterson tried to play it off, claiming he'd received a noise complaint and thought I wasn't home. It was almost midnight. I told him to leave or I'd call the police. He stared at me, stone-faced, then said, "This isn't over," under his breath before turning away. I moved out 3 days later. I stayed with friends for a while until I found a new place with a reputable property management company. I filed a formal complaint against Peterson. I also hired a lawyer. With the footage, the police reports, and statements from previous tenants, I finally had a case. The police have since opened a proper investigation. But I still can't sleep right. Every creak in my new place makes me flinch. I check for cameras everywhere now: bathroom fans, vents, light bulbs. Even hotels. People tell me I'm paranoid, but unless you've experienced what I did, you don't get it. You don't know what it feels like to wonder who's seen you, what they've seen, and where that footage might be now. If you rent, especially from an individual landlord, do yourself a favor, check everything. Don't assume you're safe just because the place is clean or the landlord seems friendly. I wish I had checked sooner. I wish I had asked more questions. I wish I had trusted that gut feeling when the pipe cover looked just a little off, because someone was watching me. And they would have kept watching if I hadn't noticed that blinking red light. I found a hidden camera taped under the sink. My name is Cameron, and this happened 3 months ago when I finally moved into my first apartment after college. I'd been living with my parents for over a year, trying to save enough to afford a place on my own. Eventually, I found a decent 1-bedroom on the 3rd floor of an older brick building downtown. Nothing fancy, but the rent was manageable, and the apartment had a kind of charm with its original hardwood floors and tall windows that let in a lot of light during the day. The landlord was an older guy named Peterson. He owned several buildings in the area and seemed friendly enough during the tour. He talked a lot, mostly about how long the previous tenant had stayed, apparently several years, before abruptly breaking her lease and moving out. I asked why she left, and he casually said something about her getting a job in another state. It didn't seem important at the time. The day I moved in was exhausting. I didn't have much furniture, but I still had to carry everything up 3 narrow flights of stairs. By the time I finished, it was evening. I was sweaty, sore, and surrounded by boxes. I figured I'd start unpacking the kitchen first, at least that way I could make myself a sandwich and crash on the couch. While putting away plates, I noticed that the panel under the sink wasn't sitting right. It looked like someone had taken it off and didn't bother to screw it back in properly. Curious, and kind of annoyed, I crouched down and pulled it away to fix it. That's when I saw it, a tiny blinking red light coming from behind the pipes. At first, I assumed it was some sort of water sensor or maybe something left by maintenance. But the more I looked, the more wrong it felt. Using my phone flashlight, I leaned in and saw that the light was attached to a small black device about the size of a flash drive taped neatly to the inside wall of the cabinet. It was a camera. A real one. Not some junky webcam, but a sleek, wireless model with a small battery pack and what looked like a wide-angle lens. It was positioned to see through the gap beneath the cabinet door right into the living room. I just stared at it for a while, unsure what to do. Eventually, I reached in, peeled it off the wall, and covered the lens with some tape from a drawer. My heart was pounding. I didn't want to panic, but something about how well hidden and precise it was made my stomach turn. After that, I couldn't stop myself from checking the rest of the apartment. I looked behind every cabinet, under furniture, around the windows, even inside the bathroom fixtures. That's when I found the second one behind the toilet tank, pointing straight at the shower. Then another inside the bedroom air vent, carefully placed to have a full view of the bed. A fourth one was wedged behind the hallway light fixture, and the last one, by far the worst, was inside the smoke detector directly above my bed. That one didn't just have a camera, it had a microSD card and a small hard drive. It felt like my skin was crawling. Someone had been watching, recording, not just streaming. There was no way these were for security. They were hidden, aimed at the most private areas. Whoever set them up didn't want anyone to know they were there. I called the police that night. It took them over an hour to show up, and when they did, they didn't seem particularly alarmed. One officer asked if maybe the cameras were part of a home security setup left by the previous tenant. I pointed out that they were hidden, not positioned to catch break-ins, and definitely not something a normal tenant would forget. They eventually took the devices and said they'd file a report, but warned me not to expect much unless I had proof of who installed them. That night, I didn't sleep. I kept replaying everything over and over. The idea that someone might have been watching me even before I moved in made me feel sick. The footage could be anywhere. I had no idea how long it had been going on or what kind of person would do something like that. The next morning, I called Murdoch Peterson. I didn't accuse him outright, I just said I found some devices and had contacted the police. His reaction was strange. At first, he sounded confused, then quickly shifted to anger. He claimed I had no right to remove anything from the apartment and that I'd violated the lease by damaging the unit. He even threatened to evict me. Then he slipped up. He said, "You have no idea how much that equipment cost. The people who needed that footage don't like being disappointed." There was silence after that, like he realized what he'd just said. I didn't respond. I just hung up and started calling lawyers. The police didn't act right away. They said unless I could prove he was the one who installed the cameras, there wasn't much they could do. His weird comments on the phone didn't count as a confession, apparently. Meanwhile, I started seeing his car parked outside more often. Once or twice, I caught him watching from across the street. He had no reason to be there, his office was in another building a few blocks away. One day I came home and found my door unlocked. Nothing was stolen, but a few drawers had clearly been opened. I changed the locks that night and bought 2 visible security cameras for the entry and hallway. I also started tracking down former tenants. It took some digging, but I found 2 women through Facebook who used to live in the building. Both of them said they left early because the place felt off. One of them even mentioned that she had the creepy sense of being watched but could never prove anything. 2 weeks after the first discovery, things escalated. I was getting ready for bed around 11 p.m. when I heard my door handle jiggle, then turn. Luckily, The chain lock I'd added held it shut. I crept to the door and listened. That's when I heard his voice, Mr. Peterson, muttering angrily on the other side. Another voice, a younger male, whispered something I couldn't make out. They tried the key again, harder this time. I turned on my phone camera and started recording. When I opened the door just enough for the chain to keep it closed, he jumped back. Behind him was a younger man, maybe in his 20s, who immediately walked away without saying anything. Mr. Peterson stammered something about responding to a maintenance issue and thinking I wasn't home. I told him to leave. He glared at me like I'd just ruined his life and walked off, but not before muttering, "This isn't over. I moved out that weekend. Slept on a friend's couch for a month until I found a new place. I'm still in the middle of a legal battle over the lease and security deposit. My lawyer thinks I have a strong case, especially with the other tenants willing to come forward." The police finally reopened the investigation after more complaints surfaced, but I don't know if it'll lead to anything. What haunts me is how long it might have been going on. How many people he watched without them knowing. How much footage is out there. Now, I check every room I enter. Hotel vents, bathroom lights, even my new apartment. I've inspected every inch and still sometimes lie awake wondering if I missed something. My friends think I'm paranoid, but they didn't find blinking red lights under their sink. If you rent from a private landlord, check everything. Not just the locks and appliances, look in the hidden places too. Some people think they have the right to invade your life. Don't give them the chance. The movers brought more than just boxes. My name is Trevor, and 3 months ago, I moved into a new apartment in Denver after finally getting a promotion. It wasn't much, just a 3rd-floor 1-bedroom in an older building, but it was mine. No more roommates. No more shared bathrooms or noise at midnight. I hired a company called Budget Express Movers because they were cheap and available. Their website looked clean enough, and the reviews seemed decent, even if a few mentioned delays or small damages. Nothing alarming. I spoke to someone briefly on the phone, gave them my address, and was told a team of 3 would arrive on Saturday morning. They showed up right on time. 2 young guys, maybe early 20s, and 1 older man with graying stubble and sun-damaged skin. He introduced himself as Mike. All 3 wore faded matching shirts with the company's name. Though the logo was barely visible anymore, the young guys barely said a word. Just moved box after box like they'd done this 1,000 times. Mike did most of the talking. He was polite, casual, kept rubbing his jaw like he had a toothache, and constantly checked his phone like he was waiting for something. Everything seemed fine at first. The team loaded my belongings quickly and efficiently. I followed the truck to the new apartment, trying not to lose sight of it through traffic. Once we arrived, the younger movers started hauling everything upstairs while I stayed near the entrance to direct them. Mike told me they had brought some extra supplies: blankets, tape, plastic wrap just in case. I thanked him but said I didn't need anything extra. He gave a small nod, but I noticed a quick glance between him and one of the younger guys. I couldn't explain why, but it unsettled me. About 30 minutes in, I went to use the bathroom. When I came back out, there were 5 boxes sitting in the hallway outside my door that I didn't recognize. They weren't labeled like mine, and none had my handwriting, just a few numbers in thick black marker. I asked Mike about them. He looked down, paused, then gave a chuckle, saying they must have accidentally loaded boxes from another job earlier that day. He told one of the guys to take them back downstairs, but the boxes didn't move. I saw the kid slide them closer to the stairwell but not carry them down. Then more of my boxes came in, and I got distracted checking for damage. It wasn't until the movers said they were almost finished that I remembered. I walked down the hall and saw the boxes still there, and touched. One of them had tape that had come loose. I shouldn't have looked, but I did. Inside was a prepaid burner phone still in its packaging. Next to it was a fresh roll of duct tape. But the worst thing was a folded piece of paper. On it was my full name, new address, apartment number, and my work hours. Details I had never shared with anyone, not even the moving company. At the bottom was a handwritten note, third floor. Fire escape access, my stomach dropped. This wasn't a mix-up. Someone had packed that box on purpose. My hands shook as I reached for my phone, but I heard fast footsteps on the stairwell. I quickly closed the box and started walking back like nothing happened. Mike appeared, breathing a little heavier than before. He asked if everything was good. I nodded, trying not to show I was panicking. He looked at the boxes, then back at me. We both just stood there for a few seconds before he stepped forward and grabbed two boxes, saying he'd handle it. I watched him carry them downstairs and listened as the front door shut. I rushed back to check the rest, but they were empty. Whatever had been inside was gone. I locked my door and called the police. They showed up within 20 minutes, took my statement, and had a look around. But without the phone or the paper, there wasn't much they could do. The officer wasn't dismissive, but he did mention that sometimes customers misinterpret things during stressful moves. I didn't argue. I just nodded. But I knew what I saw. When I tried calling the moving company again, no one picked up. The number kept ringing. I checked the website and noticed things I hadn't before. No physical office listed. The reviews all sounded oddly similar in tone. The truck photos, stock images, I found out through a reverse image search. Their whole online presence felt fake, like it had been put together quickly, just enough to look legit. The next few nights were brutal. I barely slept. Every noise in the hallway made me jump. I installed extra locks and bought a basic security camera for my front door. Then, a week after the move, I got a call from an unknown number. Just breathing. I hung up. Then another came the next night. Different number. Same thing. I started crashing at a friend's place. Saying my heat wasn't working. I didn't want to sound crazy. I went back once during the day too. Grabbed some clothes and found my door unlocked. No sign of forced entry. Nothing stolen. But little things were off. A chair slightly turned. A kitchen drawer left open. Someone had been inside. I moved out that same afternoon. Threw what I could in my car and left the rest. Found a short-term rental with a doorman and cameras in every hallway. I never heard back from the police. Budget Express Movers site went offline a few days later. Sometimes I try to convince myself it was just bad luck. Maybe it wasn't as sinister as I thought. But I always come back to that list with my name and routine. To the way Mike looked at me in the hallway like he already knew what I'd find in that box. I've moved twice since. I vet everything now, every review, every employee photo, every company detail. I don't share more than necessary. I check every box that comes into my apartment, even if I packed it myself. I don't leave anything to chance anymore, because once strangers know where you live, once they've been inside, it's hard to ever feel like the place is truly yours again.